Well, good afternoon. This is Jay Waters. I'm with the Americans in Wartime Museum Project, and this is our oral history program. We're in Toms River, New Jersey. Today's 29 October 2018, and this afternoon I have Mr. Joseph Murphy for an interview. And Mr. Murphy, if you would, just give us your full name, your date of birth, and where you were born, please.
Joseph T. Murphy. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I was.
And what war did you participate in?
The Korean War.
And did you have any family members, brothers, sisters, or parents, grandparents that had served in the military?
I had two brothers that served in World War II.
Okay. And looking back to December 7th, 1941, where were you on that day, and what do you remember about the Pearl Harbor attack?
Kind of hazy, but I know the whole country got behind our president and the service, and everybody was very patriotic. Everybody wanted to pitch in any way they could.
Or how about even more recently, the September 11th attack up in New York and in the Pentagon?
Well, I was running Sports Week here, and I had called just before I left the house. I looked on television. I saw, they said a plane. Fellow was reporting about 6 blocks away. Looks like a small plane went into one of the World Trade buildings, and then I left. I came up. Half the people showed up, and the other half, and I called them up and said, "Hey, you're supposed to be up here playing shuffleboard." He said, "Don't you know what happened?" What? So I went into in the ballroom, and then they had the TV on, and then the second plane hit, and then we knew that this was a terrible thing, and it really was horrible.
And that was right here at Lake Ridge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus being so close to New York. I mean,
right.
just up the road.
I worked in New York when the first bomb, that was a number of years before, and they placed a bomb.
Right.
And I know that one of the fellows that worked with us was out to lunch, and he said he was a few blocks away. It lifted him right off the ground.
Wow. That was the bomb that was in the
parking
basement
garage,
basements and stuff. Wow. Wow. Well, why did you join the military?
Well, actually, I was drafted.
And so, how old were you, and what year was this when you?
I was 21. Was drafted on September 4th, 1951.
And how did the draft process work for you back? Or how did it work back then?
Well, I went to Whitehall Street in New York. That was the induction station, and kind of funny thing. They started drafting for the Marines at that time, and I happened to know the fellow that was the recruiting sergeant there. So I said, "Whatever you do, don't let me go in the Marines." I don't know. Probably would have been better if I did, but so he said, "Don't worry, Joe, I'll take you." So then I went to Fort Dix. Well, I went to Kilmer first for processing, and then they took an aptitude test there, and then they said I was suited to be a meteorologist or a chemical lab technician. So naturally, sent me for infantry basic in Fort Dix.
And so, what was this test like that you had to take? Do you remember?
Well, it was supposed to test you, see what you were inclined, that was your best suited for, Yeah. And
so
I think they're wasting their dollars.
They made you an Army infantryman.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us about the training at Fort Dix.
Well, it was good. We had mostly guys from New York and from the Boston area, a very good group of people, and a lot of the guys had just graduated from college. It was a pretty intelligent group of people, and we all got along well. And we went through, the 16 weeks, and some things better than others. And they had a consolidated mess right across the way from our barracks, and it's fed about 3,000 people. Our battalion would be 4 companies. Well, there was only 2 companies there when we were there. And part of the time, the other company was out on bivouac, so we were always on KP, but we got used to it.
Yeah. Did you get a break after basic training, or what happened after?
No, right after that, we were shipped out from Brooklyn, New York, on a ship. I think it was the General Bruckner. They claimed it was the cleanest ship in the fleet, but
And that left from New York.
left from Brooklyn, and we went from there to Puerto Rico, and we picked up Puerto Rican troops. And from there we sailed to Cartagena, Colombia, and we picked up Colombian troops. And then we were going to proceed through the Panama Canal. And the Brooklyn troops had the KP from start. Then they decided maybe they'd have the Puerto Rican troops, that they would handle it at that point. But it was so brutally hot going through the canal. These guys all quit. So although their colonel was calling over the loudspeaker for them, they wouldn't listen to him. So for 2 days we didn't eat.
Wow.
And so then they finally settled it. They decided they'd have 2 lines, one for the Puerto Rican troops and one for the other troops. You didn't work, you didn't eat, and that worked it out. Yeah.
When were a lot of the Puerto Rican troops, were they drafted as well, you think, or?
Probably, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they would have been under U.S. control.
Yeah.
But, And I guess I'm just thinking out loud. They probably all were speaking Spanish amongst themselves.
Yeah, he was speaking Spanish over the loudspeaker
Yeah.
to try to get them to come back. And the second day, we were walking around. We're trying to find something to eat. This other fellow and myself, and we came across this huge pot, and it had a piece of brown paper on top of it. So we lifted it up, and it was Jello. It hadn't gelled, and so we found 2 bowls, and we were kneeling alongside of it, drinking this liquid Jello to fill our stomachs.
How did it taste?
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. Well, tell me, what do you remember about the Colombian troops? Because
they seemed like nice people. We all wore fatigues, but they had like a brass brass pin that would kind of distinguish them from the others. So generally, the Brooklyn group would stay in the front of the ship, and the Colombians would also, and the Puerto Rican group would stay to the back of the ship. They seem like a good group of individuals.
Yeah, I guess from a NATO, a UN resolution for the Korean War included a bunch of soldiers from other countries. Did you ever run into any other soldiers from other countries as well?
Well, when I was online in the punch bowl, the ROK soldiers were the very next position to us. We were ROK soldiers, Republic of Korea. On the other side of us, we had Greek troops.
Okay.
And
yeah.
They were kind of wild and crazy guys. They'd be shooting up everything and trying to sell you guns or whatever.
Yeah, I think people forget the international aspect of the Korean War. So so you picked up the Colombians, you got through the Panama Canal. So then, where did you actually end up? Where did you end up next?
Yeah, well, we got off at the Panama on the other side just for a couple of hours. Then we got back on the ship, and they were supposed to go north, the northern route, which was the shorter route going over to Japan, but there was horrible weather, so they decided to go the southern route, which is the longer route, but the weather was beautiful, so we didn't have a problem with that. So we went to Hawaii first, and then we got off for most of the day, I guess, in Hawaii, because we had no money, so that kind of colored our what we thought Hawaii was like. So had a beach in Coney Island that's bigger than this. Right. But then we went from there to Osaka, Japan.
Okay.
And they did some processing, and then they put us on train. We went down to Sasebo, the tip of Japan, and from there we got onto a cargo ship, which they used to call Japanese luxury liners. We were in the hold, and then we went over to Busan.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, so I'm just trying to think logistically, were you issued all your combat stuff in Japan, or when you got to Korea? Or
in Japan, yeah.
In Japan, so that was the final preparation. Right. And then what was Busan like when you arrived in Busan?
Well, we were just there very shortly, and then they put us on a train first, and then on trucks to bring us up the line,
And so by now, you're in a specific unit, right? Could you just tell us what unit you were in?
Yeah, it was with Fox Company, 35th Division, 35th, what was it?
Battalion, probably,
Battalion, and the 25th Division.
Okay, the 25th ID, yeah. And you're what's your rank now at this point?
Well, I was a private. We were buck privates.
Still
just got out of basic training.
Right. Infantryman, private.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And then what was your reception when you got up to the line?
Yeah, they kept splitting us in different units, and then we finally got up and joined this box company. 4 of us, and then another fellow that I took basic training with, and then 2 guys from Kentucky. I think they have a bird on there, whatever unit that was, and we went into the company together. And then I was went into a rifle squad. This buddy of mine went into a mortar squad.
Sure.
And I'll tell you what, he was a good guy, but big guy, 6'2", and shock of black hair, and all he was worried about was going bald wearing the helmet. Well, about 7 to maybe 10 days after we arrived, we were trying to spread out there. These mortar rounds come in, and I heard some guys got hurt. So we were on line for a couple of months. I came back in reserve, and then I went to the tent where he would be at, and I asked about him. I said, oh, that's the new guy. He got wounded and he got sent back. So I tried a few times to follow up, but I could never, contact. So I had no idea how badly he was hurt.
Yeah, maybe it was relatively minor, but
Yeah,
significant enough to get
he
sent
didn't go
back.
bald
but-
anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess.
Yeah.
But,
Was it your understanding, did they try to integrate the new guys into more experienced units, or was it a whole bunch of new guys at once put up on the line?
well, I know when we went online for the first time, the first week they wouldn't let you go out on patrols until after you're online for a week to get your feet wet, and it just makes you in with the rest of them.
What kind of weapon did you have? What kind of weapons did you have?
Well, initially I was with an M1, and then I became a BAR man.
Okay.
Later on, I transferred into the combo squad, so it was a couple of different.
Did you have an issue of a couple grenades and a knife or a pistol, or
No pistols, but we had all the ammunition, and the BAR was plenty of ammunition.
well, that was pretty heavy too, right?
Yeah, I think they usually try to get a bigger guy, I guess, I don't know, to do that. So. And that's the guy they want to get rid of when you go out on patrol.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you just kind of describe when you're on the line, not out on patrol, but what was a typical day like then when you're up on the line?
Well, in the punch bowl, I was doing. You'd be doing guard duty, and it was like 4 hours. They would tell you that we'd serve for 2 hours, and we'd say, "You can't get any sleep that way." So we decided we'd do 4 hours. But it was bitterly cold, and all this up in the mountains, and then it was supposedly the sergeants were supposed to come around and wake up your relief to relieve you, but that never happened. You would be you'd be there till dead froze over. So anyway, so we would wake the other guy relief, but it'd be 10 feet or 15 feet away from your bunker to the fighting position. And in one case, you're fully dressed in a bunker with your shoes and everything on, and then I was hard to wake up. This guy'd be lifting my feet, dropping me one time, and then I got up and I'm putting myself together. And we had a company commander, a little chubby guy, and then he left, and then we got a man from West Point. And this was like the first day or second day, and I'm just getting out, and I look up and I see somebody coming along the skyline. I was like, I'm gonna shoot him. but we had the sign and countersign, and then he came down and he said, "What are you doing?" "I'm going on guard duty." He said, "Well, where's the other guy?" I said, "Well, he's back in his bunker, which is like 10, 15 feet away. Get him out here. Put him out here." So then we got a gig. When we went back in reserve, we were ready to get a stripe, but we didn't get one. So, But I wasn't intended to make it a career, so it didn't hurt me too badly. So.
Sure. And so this is at the Punch Bowl. Were you facing North Koreans or Chinese, or did you know?
I think they were North Koreans at that point, yeah. When we went to Heartbreak Ridge, we had the Chinese there.
Okay, but even at the Punch Bowl, how far away were the North Koreans away from you, or did you
It
ever?
was quite a
did you see them?
distance. It was, they were mostly just mortar fire and artillery back and forth, and but when we went to Heartbreak Ridge, we were out on patrol all the time, and One time they decided that they wanted to try and go to the enemy's MLI, which is like MLR, which is about 300 yards from ours, you know, and it's all mountainous, and try and grab a couple of prisoners, for interrogation, which I think is a crazy idea, but we did it anyway. So
Right.
anyway, they had it was like, we called it a finger, you know, it was a mountain, when you go down this thing, they did high points and low points. So they said, well, platoon-size patrol, we'll send one squad out, and this will be checkpoint A, they'll secure that. Then the next one, they'll go and be checkpoint Baker. And then I was in the fourth squad. The third squad was supposed to go out, and then they go down to checkpoint Charlie. But they went down, it was a very steep decline. And the enemy was on checkpoint Charlie, and they shot the guys up pretty good. And to try to get back up was not easy.
Yeah.
So then we went out to fourth squad, and I was using my BNR. There was stuff all the way back to, I don't know, as far as you could go. The sky lit up. I mean, things were, and so we were firing, and then my BAR jammed on me. But there was another fellow that was wounded there, was a BAR man, so I had to convince him that I was not going to abandon him. So I borrowed his BAR. And then things finally quieted down a little bit. And then they told us that we should go forward and take checkpoint Charlie, which when we got there, the enemy had left. So at that point, they told us, turn around and come back, which we did. So,
Were you able to pick up the guys that were either injured or
yeah,
maybe stranded out there?
So we brought everybody back. So it's
to include the guy with the other bar gunner.
yeah.
Was he? What happened to him? Was he okay? Do you know, or?
Some of them were pretty badly hurt, but
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah. Were you able to capture any prisoners?
No, we never got to we didn't get that far. We got
Yeah.
3/4 of the way there. So
Which would be no easy task.
no,
Anyway,
I
unless they
don't know
wanted
why
to
they thought of it anyway.
Yeah. maybe unless they just wanted to surrender. Maybe.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. And they the Chinese used to broadcast to us, and it really come through pretty clear. And they would tell us, they had the Marines were on there before we came, and they would tell us that you're going to die in the blood of your brothers from whatever the Marine division was or what have you. And we had a helicopter would fly, and it would all broken up. You could hardly understand what they said. We're supposed to be the richest country in the world, and this is what we're doing.
But when the Chinese were broadcasting, it was in English, right?
Yeah, and they would tell us and then they would play some music like I guess they thought it was like Stephen Foster's, something like that. That wasn't our hit tunes or anything.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you wonder who the person was on the other side coming up with this, or even was it grammatically correct what they were saying? Do you remember?
You could understand them. Sure.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, anything else about Heartbreak Ridge? I mean, you did the patrols. Were you ever major attacks coming at you from the bad guys? Or?
No, we went out on patrols and we got into firefights, from time to time. And another time when I was in a combo squad, I was walking. I had a couple of radios that had to be repaired, so I was walking down to this break that this truck would come up. And as I was walking, I guess the enemy saw me, so they started walking mortar rounds behind me, and they knocked me off my feet a couple of times. So in one place, I dived into an abandoned bunker, and there was this white powder all over the floor and a number of dead rats. So as soon as I could, get out safely, I left. I didn't want to stay there so long.
What do you think the white powder was?
It was something to kill these rodents. They'd be running all over the place. So then when I got down to where the truck would come in, the engineers had cut through this Heartbreak, and they put a sign up there that we broke the back of Heartbreak Ridge or something, So I was sitting there with about 3 or 4 guys, and it was, I sat with my back to this thing, and it was probably, the dirt was 2 foot above my head, I was sitting in my back to it. And anyway, and there was a young fellow, a redhead, freckle-faced kid, and he was sitting on his helmet facing me, and then the barrage started coming in. So he was telling me just before that his brother was in a nearby unit and he was going to get transferred. And then he said, getting too hot, he just stood up and this round came over over my head, and it hit him right here. It didn't explode, so it was either defective or it hit the top of the spout and didn't go off, but it just blew a hole and he died immediately. I mean, it's just, so then there was some kind of a bunker, we got into that, but they continued for a while, and then I was going back to my own hoochie, and I had these, what do they call those pants you put on over your fatigues? They're weatherproof. Anyway, they were hitting together, and I kept thinking that's around.
Oh,
You get a little edgy one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, the guy
It was like-
was pretty. The guy that got killed was
Yeah.
pretty close to you, right?
Yeah, right at my feet.
Wow. Any other? It looks like you got. What was it Kumwa? Kumwa was in a major campaign as well.
Well, that was, the Heartbreak Ridge and Punch Bowl on the eastern shore, they were all mountainous. Kumwa was like in central Korea, and it was fairly flat. So we were there, we used to go out on patrols there and all, and they said if there's going to be a push, it'd probably be the ideal place for it to come through there, So I think the hill in front of us was they called it Jackson Heights, I think. They go, in front of, when I was at Heartbreak Ridge, there was a thing like this, that was the enemy's MLR. They called it Dagmar Ridge. That'd be before your time, but there was, before the Tonight Show, they had Broadway Open House, and they had a gal who was amply endowed called Dagmar, and that's what they named it after.
And Jackson Heights, it's just all the interesting names they come up with. Any major action in the Kumwa area?
No, we didn't. We just patrols there. But then I remember you used to go down. When I was in Punch Bowl, we just had sea matches all the time. Then when we got to Heartbreak Ridge and in Kumwa, I guess like maybe once a month or something, you go down and you get a shower, fresh clothes, and spray you down with stuff, and then you get a couple of hot meals and go back up the same day. So when I was in Kumar, I went down, and then when we finished eating, they had these 3 barrels, and they had them heated with some kind of a thing, and you'd scrape your stuff off to this, and suds would be in this, and then clean. Anyway, one of them wasn't working. I didn't pay much attention, but when I got back online, it was coming out both ends. I felt horrible. So finally they called, and they came and they got me, and they took me down and loaded me on a Jeep, and I'm bouncing around, which was worse. Then they took me back to a tent in some place, and they thought I had hemorrhagic fever, which was from rats, but then they finally decided that it was acute gastroenteritis. So I was there several days, and then I heard a rumor that there's going to be, they used to call it a drop ship coming in with replacements, and I was about ready to come home, and I'm saying, I'm better. If I'm not online, I'm not going to miss that. So got back online, and just right after I got back online, they announced that they were going to be rotating. And then it was Chinese New Year was coming up shortly, and they said, there's rumors that something's going to happen. They'll do it on this holiday to celebrate it. So we were anxious to get out of there.
So were you gone by the time?
Yeah. So we got out of there. So.
Did you ever find out if anything happened on Chinese New Year?
No, I didn't.
Well, how much time did you spend in Korea then? Was it about a year?
Yeah, I think on here it says 11 months and 13 days.
Pretty close, yeah. Pretty close to it. Well, while you were still in Korea, were you able to stay in touch with family, parents, friends back in the States?
Well, I could write and all, because another silly thing, I'm doing a lot of silly things, but after I was there a while, it's the most godforsaken place in the world, and the weather is terrible, and so I wasn't writing home. So anyway, my commanding officer calls me, and I said, what did I do now? And he said, why didn't you write to your mother? Oh my God. So I start writing at the sky is blue, the clouds are white, whatever. Yeah. But anyway, she knew I was alive, I guess.
And did you guys get mail in theater?
Yeah, it would come intermittently, and there was some guy, he was from like California, and I guess they subscribed to the paper, and then he would get up on the newspaper. This is the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Like a month's worth of newspapers at one time. Wow, wow. Well, you talked a little bit about when they would pull you back from the line for meals or showers and stuff.
Yeah.
But did you ever get any extended amount of time back, like an R&R? Did they give you some time off?
I didn't think. I said, when I went back once, when I came off Heartbreak Ridge, we went back, and there was a little, island off of Busan. It was called Kojito, and they had prisoner of war camp. So I think we were there for probably about a month. We were guarding the POWs.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would, take them out on make work details and stuff like that.
What was your impression of, were these Chinese or North Koreans or a mix? What was
They were a mix, yeah.
What was your impression of the prisoners?
I don't know, we didn't mix that with them. You guard 30 or 40 guys.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we went to an abandoned village. We just like having to pick up rocks, just make it work, bring them back. They would make huts out of rocks and mud, and you put a tin roof on, or they'd use that on the side of the road to low line up. Anyway, these guys were up there, and they knew when their break was. They didn't have watches, but somehow they could put 2 sticks in the ground and figure out they needed a break. Anyway, usually they would eat we called it gohan. It was fish heads and rice, and they would just always have diarrhea, So they would just most of the time just lower their pants and wherever they went. Yeah? So we're in this abandoned village, and the guy wants to go into this building, and I said, wait, and all the rest of the prisoners are all laughing, So I found out that's where they keep that, they fertilize with that. So this was the honey bucket or whatever they call it, and that's where he wanted to go. Another time, yeah, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Another time I was guarding these guys, they were making a parking, they're putting stones around and stuff, and they had 2 like telephone booths, like for bathroom, it was just a thing with a hole in it, one for the Americans and one for the Koreans, So this guy wanted to go, so I said, okay, but leave the door open. I'm watching like 30 guys while this is going on, so I happened to glance over there, and he's up on top of it. I didn't know what was going on. He was standing up on top of the thing. They're not used to sitting down on anything, so I was like, at first I didn't know what was going on.
Wow, I thought you were going to say he was trying to escape or something.
No,
yeah, maybe just culturally. That's
just,
how
I used to say they would make great catches in baseball because they were always squatting down. It's like,
Did you have anything like we mentioned R&R? It sounds like you didn't get any R&R.
Oh yes, after 6 months there, you were eligible for R&R.
Okay.
Yeah, I did go to Japan for 5 days R&R. Yeah.
Okay, how was that?
It was fine. Well, then when I was there, just when it was ending, Eisenhower was elected. He came over, and so they froze everything just when we were ready to come back, and nothing was moving while he was in the area. And then we came back online.
And so when you're up on the line, you probably didn't have much free time to be playing cards or any kind of guard duty, sleep, eat.
Yeah, like
take care of the equipment.
in the punch bowl was just like big enough for 2 sleeping bags, guys, and then you could just about sit up in this little hoochie, we call it. At Heartbreak Ridge, it was a little better. We was there when we got there, but they had 4 bunk. They had they had some metal things with like commo wire, and they had 2 black bunks on either side in a fighting position in the front,
Mm-hmm. Pretty primitive conditions. Yeah.
Well, that was a lot better than what we had before. Improvement.
Yeah, relatively. Well, you mentioned
and then we were able to, I'm sorry.
No, you mentioned how cold it could be. Wasn't it pretty hot though too, and windy? Didn't you have a lot of wind?
Well, a lot of wind, and then when you get the monsoons, it really that really rains. Never end.
Yeah. Huh. Other than what we already talked about, are there any other major incidents that stand out to you that were either, very frightening, or maybe something actually very funny happened, or in between?
One thing I think the worst thing, they had a forwarding operating position, like half we had like 300 yards to the enemy, and then about 100 yards out or something, had what's called a forward operating position, and they kept it manned 24/7. So you would go out there by yourself, and like as soon as it got dark, and you'd get a couple of candy bars or something. You had your weapon, your ammunition, and a radio, and you had to stay awake for 24 hours. And that's the longest day of my Army life.
Yeah. So you had to do that a few times?
Yeah, so
Wow. Okay. Did you either individually or with a unit get any awards or recognition, any medals or anything?
Well, I get the Bronze Star.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you get the Bronze Star?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Okay. We had the Combat Infantry badge. That, it was normal.
Okay. Well, so then you mentioned before about getting taken out of the line, getting ready to come home right before the Chinese New Year. So maybe just talk me through how that works. So you're starting to withdraw from Korea.
Yeah, well, they got this guy. You got 4 points for every month you were online, and when you got 36 points, you were eligible to rotate home. So I had roughly about 39, I guess. But so they would get the guys that were eligible, and then they bring in the replacements. And then I remember we were riding in a truck. Some guys were throwing their gun over the side because they were happy to be going the other way. And, anyway, it's.
And what was the route to get back to the U.S.?
Well, we got on a truck someplace, and I guess I don't remember. I guess they probably went back down to Busan, and then
what, a ship? Maybe did you go back to Japan to?
Yeah, we went back to Japan, and then we came home.
Okay. And what was? And then were you demobilized?
Well, when I came home, I landed in Seattle.
That's right.
And then I spent a couple of days there. It just rained all the time. And I remember I called my mom, told her I was there, and then she said, it was right after the holidays, and there was a plane with GIs that crashed right before that. So my mother said, promise me you won't fly. I said, don't worry, Mom, not a problem. So they said, well, if you lived on the East Coast, you flew. So anyway, they put us on these planes, they were charter planes, and they looked like they hadn't been painted, So the two of these things that took us, and we got on there, and then first place, these were prop planes. We landed in Fargo, North Dakota, the most desolate-looking place in the world. And then we stopped in Chicago, and they allowed us to get off the plane there. And it was kind of funny, nobody, O'Hare in the airport, and guys hadn't seen a lot of the things. All these guys were having drinks and stuff, and this flight attendant she was running around trying to gather us up to get us back on the plane, And then I know one guy, and we couldn't wake him up when we got to the end of the thing. It's just we landed in a little airport near Philadelphia someplace, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and who was there but the Salvation Army with coffee and donuts? I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. And then from there, did you go back up to Brooklyn?
Yeah, then when I had a month's 30 days leave then, and then I had about 88 days left to do before we were able to get out. I was able to get out early. After 2 years, you got home early. I got out in 21 months actually. So then I had 88 days to do, and then they sent us around to these anti-aircraft batteries around the city. So the first place, usually I wasn't the first guy off the truck, but I got off. It was Fort Hamilton, which is pretty close to where I live.
Yeah.
So I go in there, and the guy said, "Oh, you live right nearby, so put you right here." And I said, "Wow!" So I could go home from there pretty readily. And originally I used to had to take a couple of different trains to get home, even though it wasn't that far. And then some guy said, "Don't do that. The highway was right there. Go out and put your thumb up." And it was not that long after World War II, so you wouldn't be there 5 minutes and somebody pick you up.
Well, and were you in uniform?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And guys had been in the service telling you war stories and stuff. I went out there one night in Sibbies, and I could have been there all night long.
Yeah. And so you mentioned anti-aircraft batteries around New York?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were active and ready,
yeah,
ready to go?
We used to practice, go on if there was something. And
what did they think the threat was?
Well, I know they were preparing for it anyway. I know there's one guy that came in, he was like a master sergeant, and he had spent his whole life in the military, in the infantry, and he was there a while, and he said, I gotta get out of here because they come in and ask me questions. I don't know anything about this. I gotta get back to what I know.
Yeah, and maybe between Korea and then the Cold War starting to get going.
We were just filling in
Yeah.
time, I guess, till we get out.
Did they ask you about staying in or
Yeah,
trying to-
yeah, well, I was there when I was in Fort Hamilton is when my Bronze Star came through, you know, so these guys, officers presented it and then they were asking me about whether I want to stay in, but
Yeah, but no.
I told them I already had made my plans.
Yeah, well, so maybe tell us a little bit about what you did after the military for your civilian career, but then also if there were any military or wartime experiences that you think affected you as you went through the rest of your life.
Well, I guess the greatest thing I learned was how to improvise when you don't have what you need.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not the handiest guy in the world, but you can somehow make things work
Yeah.
if you.
Yeah. And what did you end up doing as a civilian?
Yeah, well, I went to work for a steamship company, first Alcoa Steamship Company for about 10 years, and then I went to work in a steamship conference, which not too many people know what that is, but these steamship lines, it's a voluntary thing. They can join this conference even though they're all competitors, and they have limited antitrust immunity. And we would have we've had meetings on rates, rules, and conditions. And I worked in that for about 25 years. I was the assistant chairman when I left that. But it was interesting. I enjoyed that. We did run meetings all the time, and I used my puns and all, and then, you know, drive people crazy.
Improvisation skills probably too, right? So, second to last question: is there any one thing that you would want, you know, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, future generations to know about you and your military service?
No, I was proud to serve, and you know, it was you know, the people we were involved with were all good people. I mean, I made a lot of good friends there, and it was in basic training we had you know they did it by alphabetically in names. So I was in like the 3rd platoon, and there were 4 Murphys in there. 3 of them were J. Murphy. So if you got any mail,
Oh yeah,
it was tough.
Get the mail mixed up and everything else. So, do you stay in contact with any kind of like
No,
25th
we tried
ID
to,
association?
but I haven't really been able to do that.
Okay. Well, Joe, is there anything else that you wanted to cover or more detail on, or did we miss anything? Or?
I think that's pretty much it. I thank you for doing this.
Oh yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure for me
All right.
to do this.
Thank you.